The sound of fine china shattering against the wall just inches from my head is something I'll never forget. Tiny fragments scattered across the hardwood floor that I had helped my son David install just 5 years ago. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, stood across the dining room, her face contorted with rage, her perfectly manicured hand still frozen in the throwing position. "You selfish old witch!" she screamed. "After everything we've done for you!" I remained seated, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. The napkin I had been holding fell to the floor as I stared at the broken plate, my late mother's china, the set I had given them as a housewarming gift. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mom." David's voice was strained, uncomfortable, not angry at his wife's behavior, just uncomfortable with the scene. "You need to be reasonable about this." Reasonable. That word hung in the air between us. Moments earlier, they had placed a stack of papers in front of me, property transfer documents for my house, the home where I had raised David after his. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Father died, the home that was my only financial security at 68 years old. They wanted me to sign it over to them. No discussion, no warning. "Just sign here, Mom." "I've helped you both so much," I said quietly, looking at my son rather than Vanessa. "I gave you money for the down payment on this house. I paid for your wedding. I've always been there when you needed anything. And now we need this," Vanessa snapped. "David's business is struggling. We have bills to pay. That house is too big for you anyway. You're being selfish." I looked at my son, searching for any sign of the boy I had raised, the one who would curl up next to me during thunderstorms, who had cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart. But David wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the broken plate on the floor, his jaw clenched. "I'm sorry," I said, folding the papers and placing them back on the table. "I can't sign this. That house is all I have." That's when Vanessa grabbed another plate from the table and hurled it directly at me. This one missed too, but just barely. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out of our house!" I stood slowly, my knees aching as they always did these days. Without a word, I walked to the kitchen, found the broom and dustpan in the same closet where they had always been kept, and returned to clean up the broken china. "Mom, don't," David said half-heartedly. "We'll clean it up later." "It's fine," I replied, carefully sweeping the shards. My hands were steady now. Something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, a deep ache in my chest, but alongside it was something else. Clarity, perhaps, or resolve. I had spent years making excuses for them both. When Vanessa forgot to invite me to David's surprise birthday party, when they canceled our weekly dinners 5 times in a row, when they borrowed money with vague promises to pay it back someday, when they missed my birthday because they had spontaneously decided to go to the Bahamas, a trip I later discovered I had unknowingly funded. As I swept up the remnants of my mother's china, I thought about how much I had given them and how little they valued any of it. Not just the money or the gifts, but my love, my time, my understanding. I emptied the dustpan into the trash and returned the broom to the closet. Then I picked up my purse from the chair. "I'll see myself out," I said. "Mom," David called after me, his voice carrying a hint of regret that was too little, too late. "Don't be like this. We're family." I paused at the door and looked back at my son, this stranger who shared my blood but not my values. "Yes, we are. And that's why this hurts so much." I drove home in silence. No radio, no tears, just the steady sound of my breathing and the occasional car passing by. My house was dark when I arrived, and for the first time, its emptiness felt oppressive rather than peaceful. I had always taken pride in my independence after Robert died. 25. Years I'd lived alone, raising David, building a life for myself. But tonight, the quiet rooms echoed with questions I couldn't answer. How had I raised a son who would allow his wife to treat me this way? How had I been so blind to who they really were? And what was I going to do now? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold, looking through old photo albums. David as a toddler, his chubby hands reaching for the camera. David at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulder. David at his wedding. Looking at Vanessa with such adoration, it had brought tears to my eyes. When the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across my living room, I had made my decision. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I'd saved years ago, but never called. Hello, is this Eleanor Jenkins? This is Martha Wilson. We met at the community center last year. Yes, you mentioned you were an attorney. I wonder if I could come see you today. It's about my son and daughter-in-law. 2 hours later, I sat across from Eleanor in her modest office downtown. She listened without interruption as I told her everything. The years of financial support, the growing demands, and finally, yesterday's attempt to take my house. Martha, she said when I finished, have you checked your credit report recently? I frowned. No, why would I? Eleanor's expression was grim. Let's take a look, shall we? What we discovered sent ice through my veins. 3 credit cards opened, in my name, a personal loan, a line of credit against my house that I had never authorized, all traced back to David and Vanessa. This is identity theft and fraud, Eleanor said quietly. These are serious crimes, Martha. I stared at the papers in front of me, the evidence of my son's betrayal laid out in black and white. What do I do? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow yet determined. Eleanor reached across her desk and took my hand. First, we protect you. Then we decide how to handle them. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I want to give them one chance to make this right. Just one. The next week passed in a blur of activity. I filed police reports. I froze my credit. I changed all my passwords and account numbers. I met with a financial advisor to secure what was left of my savings. And I had Eleanor draft a letter outlining everything we had discovered and the steps David and Vanessa needed to take to avoid criminal charges. Through it all, my phone remained silent. No calls from David, no texts asking if I had calmed down, yet. Nothing but silence from the son I had sacrificed everything for. On the 7th day, I drove back to their house, the letter from Eleanor sealed in an envelope. My hands were steady as I parked in their driveway and walked to the front door. I rang the bell and waited, heart pounding but resolve unshaken. David opened the door, surprise registering on his face. Mom, I didn't expect to see you here. Behind him, I could see Vanessa freeze in the hallway, her expression instantly hardening. May I come in? I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. David stepped aside reluctantly. Look, about last week. Things got a little heated, but I raised my hand to stop him. I'm not here to argue, David. I'm here to give you this. I handed him the envelope. He took it with a confused expression. What is this? It's a letter from my lawyer, I said quietly, watching his face pale. I know about the credit cards, David, and the loan, and the line of credit against my house. Vanessa stepped forward, her eyes flashing with the same anger I had seen a week ago. You're suing us? Your own family? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. No, Vanessa, I'm giving you a chance to make this right. One chance. The letter explains everything. I turned to leave but paused at the door, looking back at my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become. I loved you enough to give you everything, David, but I love myself enough to stop. The drive home from David and Vanessa's house felt like the longest journey of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't seem to loosen my hold. It was as if that steering wheel was the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. I had just confronted my only son with evidence of his betrayal. The look on his face when I mentioned my lawyer would haunt me for years to come. Shock, then anger, then something that resembled calculation rather than remorse. Not once did I see shame or regret in his eyes. As I pulled into my driveway, memories washed over me like a tide I couldn't hold back. This wasn't the first time. The plate incident was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. It started small, as these things often do. 8 years ago, shortly after David married Vanessa, the subtle changes began. The weekly Sunday dinners I'd cherished since Robert died gradually became monthly, then, whenever they could, make it. Each cancellation came with a plausible excuse. Work stress, Vanessa wasn't feeling well, car trouble. I always understood. I never pushed. I remembered the first Thanksgiving after their wedding. I'd spent 3 days preparing, making all of David's favorites, including his father's special cornbread stuffing recipe. 2 hours before dinner, David called. Mom, we can't make it. Vanessa's parents invited us last minute to join them at their cabin upstate. It's a networking opportunity. Her dad's business associates will be there. Oh, was all I could manage, as I stared at the table set for 3, at the turkey that would now feed just 1. You understand, right? This could be huge for my career. I did understand. I always understood. The pattern continued. Christmas plans changed at the last minute. Birthday celebrations forgotten. Promises broken time and again. Each disappointment was followed by a brief period of attention, usually when they needed something. Like the time David called out of the blue, his voice unusually cheerful. "Mom, how are you? I've been thinking about you." My heart had leapt at those words. My son was thinking about me. Vanessa and I found the perfect house, but we're a little short on the down payment. Just temporarily, of course. I'll pay you back as soon as my commission comes through. $30,000. Money I had set aside for home repairs and my eventual retirement. But what was money compared to helping my son? I wrote the check that same day. The commission came and went. The money never returned to my account. When I gently inquired 6 months later, David looked genuinely confused. "Mom, that was a gift. You never said it was a loan." Maybe I hadn't. Maybe I'd just assumed. There was the time they needed a new car after Vanessa decided her perfectly. Functional Honda wasn't appropriate for a real estate agent's wife. Another $15,000 gone. Then came the renovations on their house. The vacation to Hawaii because Vanessa was stressed. The business venture that failed within 3 months. Each time I gave without hesitation, draining my savings, even taking a part-time job at the library at age 65 to replenish what I'd given away. I was so desperate to be part of David's life that I couldn't see I was being used. Or perhaps I saw but chose to look away. The truth was too painful to acknowledge. The turning point should have been my birthday 3 years ago. I turned 65, a milestone I'd looked forward to celebrating with my son. I spent the day waiting for his call. It never came. Not that day, not the next, not all week. When he finally called 10 days later, he had no idea he'd missed anything significant. "Sorry, Mom, things have been crazy busy. Vanessa's been redecorating the living room, and you know how she gets when she's in project mode." That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching the photo of David and me taken on his college graduation day. In the picture, his arm is around my shoulder and we're both beaming with pride and love. Where had that boy gone? When had he become this stranger who couldn't remember his own mother's birthday? Eleanor, my lawyer, had asked me a pointed question during our consultation. "Martha, when was the last time David contacted you without needing something?" I couldn't answer her. I genuinely couldn't remember. Yet even with all this history, nothing had prepared me for discovering the financial fraud. The credit cards opened in my name without my knowledge or consent. The personal loan that had been steadily draining my checking account through automatic payments I hadn't authorized. The line of credit against my house, that they had somehow managed to obtain using forged documents. In total, they had stolen over $70,000 from me. $70,000. On top of the nearly $100,000 I had willingly given them over the years. My retirement was gone. My security was gone. And for what? So Vanessa could have designer clothes, so they could maintain the facade of success while drowning in debt. As I sat in my car in my own driveway, unable to make myself go inside, I thought about the Martha who had raised David alone after Robert's heart attack took him too soon. That Martha had been strong. She had worked 2 jobs to provide for her son. She had gone without so he could have everything he needed, and most of what he wanted. What would that Martha think of me now? Of the woman who had allowed herself to be used and discarded by the very person she had sacrificed everything for? I finally got out of the car and walked slowly to my front door. The house felt emptier than ever, filled with ghosts of memories, and the crushing weight of betrayal. My phone rang, startling me. David's name flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "How could you?" His voice was cold, angry. "How could you go behind our backs like this? After everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. Everything they'd done for me? "David," I said quietly, "you stole from me. You took advantage of me. You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. We were going to pay it back. We just needed a little more time. And now you've brought lawyers into it? Do you have any idea how this could affect my reputation? My career?" No mention of how it affected me. No acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused. No remorse for what he'd done. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The last thread of blind maternal devotion snapped. "You have 3 days, David," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. 3 days to start making this right, or I will press charges for identity theft and fraud. "You wouldn't," he gasped. "You wouldn't do that to your own son." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of decades of love and sacrifice pressing down on me. The question isn't what I would do to my son, David. It's what my son has already done to me. I hung up before he could respond, before I could weaken, before the maternal instinct to protect him at all costs could override the newfound determination to protect myself. My phone immediately lit up with texts. "You're making a huge mistake. Vanessa is hysterical. You can't do this to us. We're family." That last one cut deeper than the rest. Family. Yes, we were family. And families were supposed to love each other, support each other, respect each other. What David and Vanessa had done wasn't love. It wasn't support. And it certainly wasn't respect. I turned off my phone and placed it on the coffee table. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked to the closet where I kept the old photo albums and pulled out the one marked David ages 1 to 5. I needed to remember the son I had raised. I needed to reconcile that sweet, loving boy with the man who had betrayed me so completely. As I flipped through pages of birthday parties and Christmases past, I wondered where I had gone wrong. Had I given too much? Not set enough boundaries? Had I somehow taught him that love meant he could take whatever he wanted from me without consequence? No. I refused to blame myself for his choices. I had raised him with love, with values, with the example of hard work and integrity that Robert and I had lived by. Whatever path had led David to this point, it wasn't one I had shown him. The choice to steal from me? That was his alone. And Vanessa's. And now, the choice to hold them accountable. That was mine. 3 days passed like a strange dream. I barely slept, barely ate. My phone remained off, charging on my nightstand, a silent, darkened rectangle containing dozens of messages. I couldn't bring myself to read. Not yet. On the morning of the 4th day, I sat at my kitchen table nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped into my throat, and for a moment I considered not answering. But I had never been a coward. I wouldn't. Start now. I smoothed my cardigan, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Eleanor stood on my porch, her briefcase in hand, her expression gentle but resolute. "You ready for this, Martha?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. As ready as I'll ever be. We had agreed to meet at my house rather than her office. This was my territory, my home, the very thing David and Vanessa had tried to take from me. It seemed fitting to make my stand here. "Have you heard from them?" Eleanor asked, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. "I don't know. I've had my phone off." She raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Instead, she opened her briefcase and began arranging documents on the table. Should we turn it on? They might have reached out with a proposal. I hesitated, then retrieved my phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up immediately, revealing 27 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most from David, some from Vanessa, a few from numbers I didn't recognize. "Anything?" Eleanor asked. I scrolled through the texts, my expression growing grimmer with each one. Threats, guilt trips, more threats. Nothing about paying back what they took. Eleanor nodded as if this was exactly what she had expected. Then we proceed as planned. Just as she began explaining the legal documents she'd prepared, my doorbell rang again. This time, when I opened it, David stood on my porch, alone. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. He wore the same expression he'd worn as a teenager when he'd been caught sneaking in past curfew, a mixture of defiance and calculated remorse. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I stepped back, allowing him to enter. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Eleanor sitting at my coffee table. "You really did get a lawyer," he muttered. "This is Eleanor Jenkins," I said. "She's helping me sort through the mess you and Vanessa created." David's jaw tightened. "This is between family. We don't need outsiders involved." "I'm afraid we're well past that point, Mr. Wilson," Eleanor said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Please, have a seat." He remained standing, hands shoved into his pockets. "I came to talk to my mother. Alone." I shook my head. "Anything you have to say you can say in front of Eleanor." The defiance in his expression hardened. "Fine. I'll get right to it. Vanessa and I are willing to forget about the house if you drop this ridiculous fraud accusation. I blinked, momentarily speechless at the audacity. Forget about the house? The house that's mine? That you tried to manipulate me into signing over to you? We were trying to help you. That house is too big for you. You're getting older, Mom. You need to think about downsizing, moving somewhere with better care options. Better care options, I repeated. I'm 68, David, not 98. I'm in perfect health. Perfect health. I work part-time at the library. I volunteer at the community center. I don't need care options. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. That's not the point. The point is, we're willing to let that go if you'll stop this insanity about fraud charges. Eleanor cleared her throat. Mr. Wilson, your mother has documentation proving that you and your wife opened multiple credit accounts in her name without her knowledge or consent. You took out a personal loan using her information. You even placed a lien against her home. These are serious crimes that carry significant penalties. David's face flushed. It wasn't like that. We were going to pay it all back. We just needed to get through a rough patch. A $70,000 rough patch? I asked quietly. Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or just frustration at being caught. Business has been slow. Vanessa lost her job. We have bills, Mom. So do I, David. Bills I can barely pay now because of what you've done. He paced across my living room, agitated. What do you want from me? We don't have the money to pay you back right now. Eleanor pulled a document from her stack and held it out to him. We've prepared a repayment agreement. 5 years with reasonable monthly payments. No interest. David stared at the paper as if it might bite him. 5 years? That's impossible. We can barely make our mortgage as it is. Then perhaps, Eleanor suggested calmly, you should consider downsizing, moving somewhere with more affordable options. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. David's expression darkened. This is a setup. You're trying to punish us. No, David, I said, my voice steady despite the pain squeezing my chest. We're trying to fix what you broke. This agreement is far more generous than what a judge would order if I pressed charges. You wouldn't do that, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. You wouldn't send your own son to jail. I met his gaze directly. I don't want to, but I will if I have to. He looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. What he saw must have convinced him I was serious because he sank into the armchair, defeated. What about Vanessa? He asked quietly. Her name isn't on this agreement. It should be, Eleanor said. She was equally involved in the fraud, but your mother insisted we focus on you, since you're her son. David swallowed hard. She'll never agree to this. That's between you and your wife, I said. My concern is protecting myself and what little I have left. He stared at the agreement for a long moment, then reached for the pen Eleanor offered. I need time to think about this. You have until tomorrow, Eleanor said. After that, we'll be forced to pursue legal action. David stood, the unsigned agreement clutched in his hand. You've changed, Mom. I nodded slowly. Yes, I have. I finally realized I deserve better than how you've been treating me. He had no response to that. He simply turned and walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. After he left, Eleanor gathered her documents. That went about as expected. Will he sign? I asked. She gave me a small, sad smile. Honestly, I'm not sure. But you did the right thing, Martha. You stood your ground. As I showed her out, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Whatever happened next, I had finally found my voice. And I wouldn't be silenced again. The deadline came and went with no word from David. No signed agreement, no phone call, nothing but silence. Eleanor advised me to move forward with filing the police report, but something held me back. One last thread of hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the lingering fear of what pressing charges would mean for our already fractured relationship. Give him one more day, I told Eleanor over the phone. Just one more. She sighed. Martha, I understand this is difficult, but we can't keep extending deadlines. It sends the wrong message. I know. Tomorrow, no matter what. I spent that evening sorting through old photographs, separating them into two piles, memories I wanted to keep close and those that were too painful to display. By midnight, my coffee table was covered with fragments of a life that no longer existed, a family that had somehow lost its way. The doorbell rang just as I was putting the last photo album away. I glanced at the clock, 12:47 a.m. My heart raced as I approached the door. Through the peephole, I could see David standing on my porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I hesitated before opening the door. David? It's almost 1 a.m. He looked even worse than before, haggard, exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red. Can I come in? I stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He walked past me without a word and sat heavily on the couch, noticing the scattered photos. Mom, He paused, rubbing his face with both hands. Everything's falling apart. I sat in the armchair across from him, maintaining a careful distance. What happened? Vanessa left. Of all the things I had expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. Left? What do you mean? She packed some bags and went to her sister's, said she needed space to think. His bitter laugh held no humor. Apparently this is all my fault. I should have handled you better. The casual cruelty of Vanessa's words didn't surprise me, but they still stung. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I never wanted to see my son in pain. David gestured vaguely at the room around us. She said I had to choose, you or her. He looked up, his eyes haunted. She's been saying that for years, you know. In different ways, a heavy silence fell between us. I thought about all the missed dinners, the canceled plans, the growing distance. Why didn't you ever stand up to her? He shrugged, looking suddenly boyish and lost. I don't know. It was easier not to. And then, I guess I started believing her. That you were interfering? That you were trying to control our lives? By giving you money whenever you asked? By babysitting whenever you needed? By always being the one to call, to reach out? He had the grace to look ashamed. It sounds stupid when you put it like that. It sounds like manipulation, David. And you played right into it. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess I did. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled repayment agreement. I signed it. For whatever that's worth now. I took the paper, noting his signature at the bottom. Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to make the payments, he admitted, especially if Vanessa and I. He couldn't finish the sentence. We'll figure something out, I said, surprising myself with the offer. But there have to be changes, David. Real changes. He nodded again, staring at his hands. I know. I don't know how to fix this. Any of it. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw past the man who had hurt me to the boy I had raised. He was flawed, deeply so. He had made terrible choices. But he was still my son. The first step is honesty, I said gently. Complete honesty. About everything. David took a deep breath. There's more, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. More than what you found out about. My stomach tightened. Tell me. Over the next hour, the full extent of their deception unfolded. The gambling debts Vanessa had accumulated. The second mortgage on their house that was 3 months in arrears. The personal loans from friends who were now threatening legal action. The credit card debt that had spiraled completely out of control. They weren't just in trouble. They were drowning. Why didn't you come to me? I asked when he finally finished. Not for money, but for help? For advice? He laughed bitterly. Pride? Shame? I don't know. Maybe I didn't want you to see what a mess I'd made of everything. I reached across the coffee table and took his hand. David, you're my son. Nothing will ever change that. But I can't fix this for you. Not with money, not with a loan, not by signing over my house. You have to fix it yourself. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't know if I can. You can. And I'll support you, emotionally, not financially, but only if you're completely honest with me going forward. No more lies. No more manipulation. He nodded, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. And Vanessa? I chose my words carefully. That's your decision. But ask yourself if she makes you a better person or a worse one. David stayed on my couch that night, falling into an exhausted sleep around 3 a.m. I covered him with a blanket, just as I had done countless times when he was a child, and watched him sleep for a few moments. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations. Calls to Eleanor. Decisions about how to move forward with the legal aspects of what they had done. Discussions about whether to involve Vanessa in the repayment plan or to pursue separate charges against her. But for tonight, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope. Not that everything would magically be fixed, but that perhaps, just perhaps, we could build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. In the morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. I found David in the kitchen, scrambling eggs and making toast. "I thought you might be hungry," he said simply. It was such a small gesture, yet it brought tears to my eyes. When was the last time anyone had cooked for me? We ate in a companionable silence that felt both strange and familiar, like rediscovering something long forgotten. After breakfast, David called Eleanor at my insistence. He explained that he had signed the agreement and wanted to discuss next steps. She agreed to meet us that afternoon. As he hung up, his phone buzzed with a text. His expression darkened as he read it. "Vanessa?" I asked. He nodded. "She wants to know if I've come to my senses yet." "And have you?" A small, sad smile tugged at his lips. "I think I'm starting to." The doorbell rang just as we were clearing the breakfast dishes. David tensed, his eyes darting to the door. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. I shook my head. "Eleanor isn't coming until 3. David moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. His face paled. "It's Vanessa, and she looks furious." The pounding on my front door echoed through the house like thunder. I could see David's shoulders tense, his face a mixture of dread and resignation. "I'll handle this," I said, moving toward the door. David caught my arm. "Mom, don't. You don't know what she's like when she's angry." But I did know. I'd seen the broken plate, heard the vicious words, witnessed the manipulation. I gently removed his hand from my arm. "It's my house, David, and I'm done hiding." I opened the door to find Vanessa, her perfectly highlighted hair slightly disheveled, her manicured fingernails curled into fists at her sides. The moment she saw me, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Where is he?" she demanded, trying to look past me into the house. "Good morning, Vanessa," I said calmly. "If you'd like to speak with David, you can do so civilly or not at all." She let out a harsh laugh. "You don't get to set the rules, Martha. Not anymore." She raised her voice, calling past me. "David, get out here now. We need to talk." David appeared behind me, his face pale but determined. "Vanessa, this isn't the place." "Oh, isn't it? Isn't this exactly the place? Your mommy's house where you've been hiding instead of dealing with our problems?" "Our problems?" David's voice was quiet but firm. "You mean the gambling debts you hid from me? The credit cards you maxed out? The loans you took in my mother's name without her knowledge?" Vanessa's face flushed with anger. "So that's it? You're choosing her over me? After everything we've built together? What have we built, Vanessa? A mountain of debt? A life of lies? Is that what you're proud of?" I stepped back, allowing them space for this conversation that was long overdue. Vanessa noticed the movement and turned her fury back to me. "This is all your fault. You've always been jealous of our relationship, always trying to come between us with your neediness, your constant presence." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. My constant presence? When they had systematically excluded me from their lives for years? "Vanessa," I said quietly, "I think you should leave now. I'm not going anywhere without my husband." David stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Vanessa and me. "I signed the repayment agreement, Vanessa. I'm taking responsibility for what we did. And I think we need some time apart." Her face contorted with rage. "You signed what? Without consulting me? How dare you?" "It was either that or face criminal charges," David explained. "We stole from my mother, Vanessa. We committed fraud. Do you understand how serious this is? Oh, please. We borrowed some money. Families help each other out. It's not like we robbed a bank." "You took $70,000 without my knowledge or consent," I interjected. "That's not borrowing. That's stealing." Vanessa turned to me, her voice dripping with contempt. "You should be grateful we even included you in our lives at all. Do you know how many times David wanted to cut you off completely? How many times he complained about your clingy behavior?" I felt the words like a physical blow, but before I could respond, David stepped forward. "Stop it, Vanessa. That's not true, and you know it. Those were your words, not mine. I was wrong to let you speak for me all these years, wrong to let you drive a wedge between me and my mother, but I'm done with that now." Vanessa's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "Fine, if that's how you want to play this." She turned to me, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet. "Martha, I'm sorry if there's been a misunderstanding. We always intended to pay back every penny. We just got in over our heads. You understand, don't you? Family supports family. The sudden change was jarring, but not surprising. I'd seen this side of Vanessa before. The manipulative charm she turned on and off like a faucet. I do understand family, Vanessa. That's why I'm giving David a chance to make this right instead of pressing criminal charges. And what about me? She asked, her voice still artificially pleasant. Am I included in this generous forgiveness? I looked at David, letting him take the lead. He cleared his throat. The agreement has my signature on it. I'm taking responsibility for this. How noble, Vanessa sneered, the facade cracking. And where exactly are you planning to get the money to make these payments? We can barely cover our mortgage. I'll figure it out, David said firmly, but I think we need to start by selling the house. It's too expensive for us, especially now. Sell the house? Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. Are you out of your mind? Where would we live? We could rent something smaller, more affordable, at least until we get back on our feet. She stared at him as if he'd suggested they live in a cardboard box. I am not downgrading my life because your mother can't take a joke. A joke? I echoed, incredulous. You think identity theft is a joke? Vanessa ignored me, focusing entirely on David. If you sell that house, you're selling it alone. I won't be part of it. It was an ultimatum, clear as day, and for the first time, I saw my son refuse to bend. Then I guess I'm selling it alone, he said quietly. Vanessa's face drained of color. She stared at David for a long moment, as if waiting for him to take it back, to apologize, to revert to the compliant husband she had always controlled. When he didn't, she turned on her heel and stormed back to her car, slamming the door before speeding away. David and I stood in the doorway, watching until her car disappeared around the corner. Then slowly, we went back inside. Are you okay? I asked as he sank onto the couch. He nodded, though his expression was shell-shocked. I think so. That was a long time coming. I sat beside him, not touching, but close enough to offer comfort if he wanted it. What will you do now? He sighed deeply. I meant what I said. I need to sell the house. It's the only way I can start making payments on what I took from you. And Vanessa? He shook his head. I don't know. Maybe this separation will give us both time to think. But honestly, Mom, I'm not sure there's anything left to save. We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, David spoke again. I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. For the money, for the lies, for letting Vanessa treat you that way. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I am truly, deeply sorry. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I know, and we'll work on it, day by day. Later that afternoon, Eleanor arrived as planned. She was surprised to find David still there, but pleased that he had signed the agreement. We discussed next steps. Freezing my credit permanently, monitoring for any new fraudulent activity, setting up a payment schedule David could manage. What about Vanessa? Eleanor asked. Will she be contributing to the repayment? David and I exchanged glances. I'm not sure she'll be in the picture, he admitted. But either way, I'll make the payments. This is my responsibility. As Eleanor was leaving, she pulled me aside. You did well, Martha. Standing your ground without cutting him off completely, that took courage. I watched through the window as she drove away, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy for either David or me. Trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild, but at least we were finally being honest with each other. That night, as David prepared to leave, back to his house, but alone this time, he paused at the door. Would it be okay if I came for dinner sometime? Maybe next week? The question was, asked hesitantly, as if he expected rejection. Instead, I smiled. I'd like that. Tuesday? A small smile lit his tired face. Tuesday it is. As his car pulled away, I didn't feel the familiar ache of abandonment. For the first time in years, his departure felt like a comma, not a period. A pause, not an ending. I closed the door and turned to face my empty house. Except it didn't feel quite so empty anymore. It felt like mine again. A place of peace, not loneliness. A sanctuary, not a prison of memories. Tomorrow, I decided I would call Eleanor about those art classes at the community center she'd mentioned. Maybe it was time to revisit the watercolors I'd abandoned when David was young. Time to rediscover the parts of myself I'd set aside for too long. 1 year. That's how long it had been since the day Vanessa threw my mother's china plate at me. 1 year since I'd found my voice, my strength, and myself again. I stood in front of the easel, paintbrush in hand, studying the canvas before me. The watercolor landscape wasn't perfect. The mountains were a little lopsided, the lake a shade too blue, but I loved it anyway. It was mine. Something I had created with my own hands, for no one's pleasure but my own. That's coming along beautifully, Martha, said Eleanor, who had moved from being my lawyer to becoming one of my closest friends. She set a cup of tea on the small table beside me. You've got a real talent, I laughed. I'm not sure my art teacher would agree, but thank you. We were sitting on my new patio, overlooking a garden much smaller than the one at my old house, but somehow more vibrant, more alive, like me. 6 months ago, I had made the decision to sell my house, not because anyone pressured me, but because I wanted a fresh start. The 3-bedroom colonial where I had raised David held too many ghosts, too many painful memories alongside the happy ones. I found a charming 2-bedroom cottage in a 55-plus community just outside town, with neighbors who quickly became friends and enough garden space to indulge my newfound love of growing herbs. Money from the sale had allowed me to set up a comfortable retirement fund, with enough left over to finally take that trip to Italy I had dreamed about for decades. Eleanor and I were leaving in 3 weeks. Rome, Florence, Venice. Places I had only seen in books and movies. Have you heard from David this week? Eleanor asked, settling into the chair beside me. I nodded, setting down my paintbrush. He called yesterday. The divorce was finalized. How's he doing with that? I considered the question carefully. Better than I expected. Relieved, mostly. It's been a long 9 months. After that confrontation at my doorstep, Vanessa had made David's life a nightmare. She had refused to cooperate with selling the house, emptied their joint bank accounts, and spread vicious rumors about both David and me to anyone who would listen. It had been ugly, painful, and exhausting. But through it all, David had remained committed to making things right. He had sold his car to make the first few payments on our agreement. He had moved into a small apartment and taken a second job on weekends. He had attended therapy, both alone and occasionally with me, to understand the patterns that had led him so far astray. Our relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still wounds that hadn't fully healed. But we were talking, really. Talking for the first time in years. He's coming for dinner tonight, I added. He wants to see the finished paintings for the community center auction. The auction had been Eleanor's idea. The community center needed funds for their children's program, and several of us from the art class had volunteered to donate paintings. I had contributed 3 modest landscapes that Eleanor insisted would sell well. You should be proud of him, Eleanor said, and of yourself. Not many families could come back from what you two went through. I smiled, thinking of how far we'd come. It helped that he was willing to do the work, real work, not just empty promises. The sound of a car pulling into my driveway ended our conversation. David stepped out carrying a small gift bag and what looked like a folder of papers. Mom, he called, waving as he approached the patio. Eleanor, am I interrupting? Not at all, I said, standing to greet him with a hug. You're early. He returned the embrace, then held out the gift bag. I wanted to give you this before dinner. An early birthday present. I took the bag, curious. Inside was a small velvet box, which opened to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a paintbrush charm. David, it's beautiful. I saw it and thought of you, he said, smiling. Your paintings for the auction are amazing, Mom. I can't believe. You've only been at it for a year. Talent must run in the family, Eleanor commented, standing to gather her things. I should head out and let you two have your dinner. You're welcome to stay, I offered, but she shook her head. Book club tonight, but I'll see you at the auction on Saturday. After Eleanor left, David and I moved inside to prepare dinner together, a simple routine we had established over the past year. As I chopped vegetables for the salad, he set the table, moving around my new kitchen with an ease that warmed my heart. I have some news, he said, his voice slightly hesitant. I got a job offer, a good one. I looked up, surprised. That's wonderful. Where? Meridian Insurance. They want me to head their new claims division. David, that's perfect for you. With your background in risk assessment, it's in Chicago, he interrupted gently. I set down the knife, absorbing this information. Chicago. Over 800 miles away. Oh, was all I could manage. David moved closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first. I forced a smile. It's a great opportunity. You should take it. But what about our dinners? What about the repayment plan? His voice dropped lower. What about us, Mom? I turned to face him fully. David, listen to me. This past year has been about healing, for both of us. Part of that healing is building independent lives. You can't make decisions based on what you think I need, but the repayment plan can continue long distance. We have phones and computers for regular talks, and planes for visits. I squeezed his hand. I want you to take this job if it's what you want. He studied my face, searching for any sign that I was just saying what I thought he wanted to hear. Finding none, he nodded slowly. There's something else, he said, reaching for the folder he had brought. I've been working on this for a while, but I wanted to wait until the divorce was final. He opened the folder and pulled out a legal document. It's a promissory note drawn up by my lawyer. It converts our informal repayment agreement into a legally binding contract with specific terms and consequences if I default. I stared at the document, touched by the gesture. David, you didn't have to do this. Yes, I did, he said firmly. I want you to know that no matter where I am, I'm committed to making this right, to being the son you deserve. Tears pricked at my eyes as I scanned the document, noting the clear terms, the accelerated payment schedule, the personal guarantee. You're planning to pay it off faster? He nodded. The new job pays better. I should be able to clear the debt in 3 years, instead of 5. We finished preparing dinner in companionable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we sat down to eat, I found myself studying my son's face, the new lines around his eyes, the more serious set of his mouth. He had aged this past year, but there was also a new maturity, a groundedness that hadn't been there before. When would you start? I asked as we ate. Mid-July. They're giving me a month to relocate. He hesitated. I was thinking, maybe after you get back from Italy, you could come visit? Help me get settled? I smiled. I'd like that. Later, as we stood on my front porch saying goodnight, David pulled me into another hug, tighter this time. I love you. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. I held him close, this son who had broken my heart and was now piece by piece helping to mend it. I love you too, David. Always have, always will. As his car disappeared down the street, I didn't feel the old familiar ache. Instead, I felt something new. Pride. Pride in the man he was becoming. Pride in myself for having the courage to demand better treatment. Pride in the new relationship we were building. Stronger because it was based on honesty and respect rather than obligation and guilt. Back inside, I picked up the paintbrush charm necklace David had given me, running my fingers over its delicate silver surface. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment. I was trapped in a cycle of giving too much and receiving too little, of making excuses for inexcusable behavior, of shrinking myself to avoid rocking the boat. Now, as I clasped the necklace around my neck, I felt the full weight of my transformation. I had reclaimed my voice, my boundaries, my sense of self-worth. I had discovered new passions, new friendships, new joys. The road hadn't been easy. There had been tears and doubts, setbacks and difficult conversations. But standing here now in a home that truly felt like mine, with a future bright with possibilities, I knew I had made the right choice that day. The day I finally said enough. The day I cleaned up the broken china in silence, then delivered consequences instead of more chances. The day I began to love myself as fiercely as I had always loved. My son.